Strangers When We Meet, summary and discussion by Schweet Life. Strangers When We Meet is a movie about Larry Coe, played by Kirk Douglas, a married, self-employed architect who has become bored with the routine and mundane aspects of his career and marriage, and Margaret Maggie Galt, who's played by Kim Novak, an unhappy suburban housewife who has moved to a new neighborhood with her family. Some excitement is added to their lives when Larry and Margaret begin an affair. In the midst of all this hubbub, Larry's skeevy neighbor, Felix Anders, played by Walter Matthau, manages to slither into the picture and further complicate matters. Strangers When We Meet was okay, but I thought it fell apart towards the end. It was worth watching once, but I probably wouldn't go out of my way to watch it again. I thought the movie was quite similar to the main storyline of Little Children, which starred Kate Winslet and Patrick Wilson. If you like Little Children, you might also like Strangers When We Meet, and vice versa. However, fair warning, Little Children is far more explicit than Strangers When We Meet. Commentary beyond this point contains spoilers, so if you haven't seen Strangers When We Meet as yet and you don't want to have it spoiled for you, I'd suggest you stop listening at this point. Put it on pause, watch the movie, come back, listen to the rest later. The content of Strangers When We Meet is rather tame by today's standards, but knowing that the movie was from the 60s, I was a bit caught off guard by the relatively open discussion of risque topics. There's the hippie, Woodstock, free love, tree-hugging late 60s, and then the not quite out of the 50s, early 60s, and this movie was released in 1960. So I was surprised to see the movie actually showed these two married people carrying on an affair without veiled references. Yet, given the risque for its time, language and content, why did these married couples have twin beds? I didn't understand that. I also noticed that while Maggie and her husband's beds were separate, Larry and his wife's beds were pushed together, which brings me to another observation. There's a bit of weirdness with Maggie's husband, Ken, who's played by John Bryant, in that while he obviously cares for Maggie, he seems to be emotionally and physically uninterested in / distant from her. Unfortunately, the movie doesn't give Ken as much attention as the other characters, so you don't really get a chance to learn much about him. After the scene where Maggie attempts to seduce Ken, I spent the rest of the movie wondering if there was going to be some big reveal about him. Was he devoutly religious? Was he a homosexual? Was he boozing it up with prostitutes during his lunch hour? I mean, what was his deal? I think the movie would have been a bit more interesting if some of the other characters, for example Dirty Felix, were dropped and the audience was allowed to see a bit more of Ken and Larry's wife Eve, who was played by Barbara Rush. It was definitely wrong for Maggie to have an affair, but I could understand why she was unhappy in her marriage. However, Larry seemed to have a good relationship with his wife, or at least good communication. It was clear that he was bored with his life and decided to have an affair, but the movie tried to make it seem like he was so in love with Maggie. Or maybe in a roundabout way, the movie was actually showing that what he thought was a passionate, never-ending love was actually a short-term infatuation. It's probably not politically correct to say, but I didn't buy Maggie's explanation for why she decided to take sleeping pills and not double-check that all of the doors were locked after some random guy that she met told her that he was on his way to her house. Maggie's version of events just didn't make sense. Why was the guy still calling? Ken was a bit weird. Maggie probably had her own issues. At first I thought Felix was simply an annoying neighbor, but he was actually shown to be a philandering busybody. I was so confused by his trying to seduce Eve. The scene was just so awkward, and I was praying that she'd run away and call 911 because his methods for seduction seemed to actually be a precursor to sexual assault. He was just so weird. What did you think of Strangers When We Meet? What was Ken's problem? How weird was Felix? I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, and/or share this video. Visit schweetlife.com and follow Schweet Life on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, Pinterest, and Tumblr.